Hello, everyone. Welcome to our session. So this is the dynamic lecture is an AI tool that you'll see one of our speakers gonna demonstrate and experience it. So we invite you to join this first to experience it yourself. So please scan the QR code. There are all different screens. To scan the QR code and logging and using the username and password student. Please submit your question that you have. What questions do you have about leveraging AI in your teaching?
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We're really excited to be at the HILT conference, and we're really excited to have you with us to talk about leveraging AI in assessments. My name is Erin Baumann. I am the Senior Associate Director of Professional Pedagogy at the Harvard Kennedy School, and I work with the amazing team in SLATE, which is our Center for Teaching and Learning there. I'll let Xueying introduce.
Thank you, Erin. My name is Prawat, and I'm a Curriculum and Assessment Specialist at Teaching and Learning Lab at HGSE, Harvard Graduate School of Education.
And with us today, we have three amazing speakers who have all agreed to showcase some of what they have been working on in their own teaching as well as with others. And to start on the left, it's on your right. From the right, we have Deslauriers, who is the Director of Science, Teaching and Learning in the Faculty of Arts and Sciences and Senior Preceptor in Physics at FAS at Harvard. In his role, Louis mentors instructors in the adoption of research-based pedagogical approaches, develops psychometric methods to assess instructional effectiveness, and devises teaching techniques designed to optimize learning and outcomes. He's also one of the founders and working closely on a project called AI Plato, which uses AI to act as a tutoring assistant to students. On the far end, closest to me, we have John FitzGibbon, who is the Associate Director for Digital Learning Innovation at the Center for Digital Innovations in Learning at Boston College. His role is to explore the use of digital tools to enhance teaching and learning practice in both online and face-to-face courses at Boston College. In addition, he manages the faculty development and innovation team to support BC faculty in all aspects of their teaching. And in the center, we have Dan Levy, who is senior lecturer in public policy at the Harvard Kennedy School and teaches in courses in quantitative methods, policy analysis, and program evaluation. Dan's research focuses on evaluating the impact of social programs, including health programs in Indonesia and Tanzania, and education programs in Burkina Faso and Niger. He's also currently the faculty director of the Public Leadership Credential at the Harvard Kennedy School, which is our flagship online learning initiative. I'm going to turn it over to Xueying to walk us briefly through our agenda.
So here's our session agenda. We are going to take a backwards journey into leveraging AI in assessment. Our panel here, we are going to showcase how even modest AI implementations can make a very meaningful impact to enhance the learning experience and assess student progress. The AI tools you will see and experience today are easy to build, easy to use, and address challenges in teaching. You will see and experience two completely different usage of AI tools, a real-time use and asynchronous use. Let's begin with authentic assessment. Since last fall, GPT-3 was released. Authentic assessment got a lot of attention. Initially, it was identified as a strategy to mitigating the using of AI, such as ChatGPT, to do the coursework. But gradually, our instruction design community has come to recognize the potential of authentic assessment in fostering meaningful conversations, driving positive changes in assessment practice, and also identifying strategies to leverage AI in the assessment process rather than fighting with it. So at its core, authentic assessment is a form of assessment in which students are asked to perform problems that is real-world tasks and that demonstrate meaningful applications of essential knowledge and skills. So what makes authentic assessment a significant strategy is that it asks us as instructors not only what we want our students to learn, but also why we want our students to learn certain things, and what do we want our students to do with this new body of knowledge and skills. So in the earlier panel session, we heard that the data from Department of Labor has shown 38% of top skills in job market has changed over the past 5 years. So here's our first question to our panel here. John, Dan, and Louis, You each work and teach in different fields and contexts. How do you think AI will reshape the work of your discipline? And what do you think this means for the knowledge and the skills required for your students?
Well, AI has the potential to revolutionize the way we understand physical phenomena. I mean, in my field in physics, and I would say in STEM in general, and I would say that's already started. It's not like we're no longer talking about 10 years from now, 20 years from now. Like right now, it's happening. For example, with our very expensive telescopes, tiny part of our national budget. But yeah, with our very fancy telescopes now, we gather lots and lots and lots of data, and we're already deploying AI algorithms to basically sift through all this data and to identify patterns. That's something we're doing now. And in the near future, and it seems like it's just in the next few years, the sophistication will be such that these AI algorithms will be able to infer meaning and quote unquote understand what they're seeing, just like a human would, and they'll be able to actually make hypotheses about what they found. Certainly what's happening now, and that's very impressive, is these algorithms are able to learn from what they're learning. So they're able to make smarter searches. So again, happening now. That's an example just to show you how the field is changing. And as far as how this will impact the way we teach, well, at the very least, and I would say starting this year, all programs should, teach students what they can and cannot do with AI, the benefits, the risks, and so forth. So yeah, in summary, so it's transforming, I think, all STEM disciplines in drastic ways. It's already started, and it's going to explode from here on out. And certainly, we should start teaching our students now about how AI works. I speak to students, every single student I talk to in my office, I always ask them, do you use AI? And if so, how, right? And I think they've been traumatized by the school so far. That's what they're telling me about not using it in their courses. And I try to give them the other side of it and say, do you use Google? If you do, you must start using AI, right? So basically, we have to do a concerted effort in our programs to teach students, the benefits so that they can extract the most out of it and what they can expect when they graduate from our programs.
Dan can go next.
Sure. So I think practically all our students are going to go into a labor market that is going to require different skills that involve AI than, say, last year. And so I think I agree completely with Louis. We need to help our students learn that skill. And in fact, more generally, I think our students, we have to question whether some of the things that we're trying to get our students to learn right now are worth learning anymore, given where our students are going to be. And that is hard, and that progress is slow because we always tend to stick to what we have been doing. But I think there are some things we shouldn't teach anymore. And in my field, I don't know, for example, we think of the policy memo as the thing that all students should learn how to write. And I don't know if that's a skill that we need our students to have anymore. I predict we're going to be too slow in moving away from that. And maybe there's a skill that underlies the policy memo that we need to teach, but not the writing of the policy memo in the way that we have been doing. And at the same time, I think our students should use their time in their education here to leverage AI and to learn the skills that AI will help them develop. I think a lot of discussion that I see in the field are about, is AI going to be better than a human? And I think that's a wrong question. It's AI plus a human better than a human. And I think for some things it will be. And for those things, we need to understand what is the role of the human in that combination of human and AI. So those are some reflections.
Yeah, thanks very much, Dan. So what we're saying to our faculty is that for the first time, maybe you have to be real specific about what your discipline is. and what are students learning with it? And that's really coming from my own discipline of political science, which has been pretty not very good at that. So this kind of came about when I put some midterm questions for my own course on populism to ChatGPT, and it generated some answers. And then I had a little cry. I had a stiff glass of whiskey, and I was like, what am I kind of doing here? But then as I kind of started reading through it and started thinking about, well, it's missing this, and like, it's missing a bit of that, and like, if it could have more of this, that would be great. And it was in that moment that it clarified for me, this is what it means to do political science. So adding in case studies, adding in complex concepts from the discipline, really digging into references, adding your own critical analysis. Those are the things that we're looking for in this discipline that generative AI cannot do. And so if you take one thing away from what I'm going to say today, it's this: they use this crazy new, fancy new technology called a rubric. And so I did that for my students, and I generated an AI, and I put it up there and I said, what did you give that? A, B, C, D, or fail? And they read through it and they're like, it's generating. They're like, oh my God, this is amazing. A, unbelievable. I said, that is a fail. It is not referenced. And then brought up the rubric and said, let's go through this together. And so in that moment, for the first, and not to blame students or anything, but for me, it was for the first time to really articulate, what does it mean to do political science? What does adding in case studies look like? What does providing a critical analysis? What does it actually look like, and what does that kind of mean? But then again, what we're going to talk about is communicating that clearly to students. Expectations have radically shifted and changed. And as I said to them then, if you're just using this, if you're just generating this, you've been replaced by AI. And what you're going to do in this class, what we're going to practice, is these specific critical skills that generative AI cannot do. And maybe for the first time, we've got to really articulate that for students in a clear way.
Thanks very much. I think now that we've heard a bit about how you're thinking, your teaching, your work needs to change, and how the work that you're asking students to do needs to change, want to think about more of the specifics. John, you mentioned really quickly some of the things that you've already done. But I know each of you have already tried building this into your assessment practice. So we want to start with this question about how have your assessment practices changed since last fall when we all, I think, got hit like a freight train with GPT-3? And how have you built AI into your overall assessment strategy? And as you're talking about this, if you can help us to maybe pull back the curtain a bit and share, have you or your students experienced any challenges as you have adapted to these new assessments? Maybe we'll start with Dan.
So I think my sense is that for most of us teaching, this has to be a year of experimentation, because I don't think we have figured out how the technology is going to affect what our students need to learn, and therefore what we need to assess. So in my courses, what I've tried to do is to be very explicit with the students that this year is a year of experimentation. They're encouraged to use AI, and they're also encouraged to reflect on how AI is helping or hindering their learning, the different uses of AI. So just to be super concrete, here's one example of a pre-class exercise. The first question, which is not on the screen, I asked the course in question is a course on decision making, or part of it's a course on decision making. So I asked the students to make a decision. The first question there is to justify their decision. And then the third question is to be able to get to their decision and use ChatGPT or generative AI to try to see if it adds any insights to what they have actually done. And so they have this statement of strongly agree, disagree, and then they get to reflect on whether it has helped them or not. And then I just want to, so we have a Slack channel on generative AI where we're all sharing what we're learning. And I just want to put this, I'll let you read it, but this is one post from one student that I thought was particularly thoughtful in terms of how he's viewing AI. So I think the reason this is important is to provide, I think there are a lot of courses where students are feeling like, can I use AI? Can I not use it? Will I be cheating? Will I not be cheating? And I think being open in how our students are learning to use it to me seems important for them, but also for us, so we can learn how it's done. Erin has 2-minute limit instructions, so I'm going to pass it on.
Go to Louis next. Yeah, and then we'll go to John.
Yeah, so the tool that you'll see in a little bit here is that I've used, this past year, is in real time, maybe in contrast to what you've used, Dan, in real time during the classroom. So the idea is that, when you have a class of 100 students or more, even less, that only a small minority of students ask questions, right? And there's always the hope to engage everyone. So is there a way to use AI so that you can engage everyone at once, and even better, answer all questions at once? And that's what we did this past year. So the idea, which is supposed to be on full display today, right? There were those QR codes for you to enter that app, for you to ask questions about what you're hearing here. So then you'll be able to see that what this tool does is that it provides a thematic summary of what people are asking. So at least in the classroom, for those of you who have taught for a while, you know that, sure, there will be some questions that are representative of only one student, but the vast majority of questions that are being asked are shared amongst a large portion of the class, right? So what you do is that you take in all student questions, because that's something I've been studying anyway in the last while, and then you form them into themes. And it's easy to do, you can tell. However, when you have 100 questions, 200 questions, it can take hours to do that carefully. And then you try to come up with representative questions that represent basically, what students were asking in that theme. And I'm telling you, this takes hours. And now you can imagine, of course, with the AI, how long does it take? It's 10 seconds. So the next thing we did, well, first I should tell you how students reacted to this. So, wait, that was 2 minutes. That's too much detail. So anyway, students loved it. And so when we interviewed students and surveyed them, this is what came out. Things like some things I did not see coming, actually. One is that it increases their confidence. So students would say, that's the one actually that came out the most. Students would say things like, I realized that my questions were not as dumb as I feared, right? Because they were shared amongst the rest of the class. So that was a big one. Obviously, another one that you'd expect is just that students were happy to learn from their peers, because they say, other students in the class had thoughts that had not occurred to me, and that helped me learn. And the big thing for me, at least how I got started on this project, is that students, almost every one of them, said that they were happy now to be able to participate, right? They felt that this was a more inclusive environment. So students reacted very positively to it, obviously. But the question is, what was the fidelity of the output, right? Students like it and everything, but how representative truly are those themes and questions that the AI came up with? So that's something we spent a lot of time studying, and we're finishing this off now. And long story short, what you do is that you randomize those themes, the ones that are generated by humans, and the ones that are an expert, an instructor like me, and the ones that are generated by AI, and then you go to other experts, right? They don't know which one is AI, which one's humans, and you ask them to rate them. And what we're seeing is that experts can't tell the difference, for the most part. And then representative questions, the same thing. Now you do that with students. How helpful do you find that representative? You don't call it representative questions, you just call it questions, right? Students don't know if that's AI or not. And then what you find is that they find that helpful. Thank you for the information.
A very analog of you, Erin. It's my colleague Tim Lindgren, who's over there, the suave gentleman with the beard. So we started playing around with this idea of communication. And, BC is a Jesuit institution. You got all the stuff about formation, that kind of thing. And so instead of bringing a Jesuit into class to tell the students they're all going to hell for using we thought maybe more productive, purposeful sense. And so Tim started to focus on this idea of being human. And, building on exactly what Dan and Louis are saying there, really clearly articulating that for students. And so with some other colleagues and some other ideas from other people, Tim really kind of developed this kind of traffic light system of red, be human, so don't use AI, be human, yellow, be purposeful, and green, be curious. So, I mean, you've all seen Bloom's. This is something that's very much a work in progress. We literally did this on Tuesday and presented it for Mission Ministry. But trying to articulate both the specific skills and the Bloom's taxonomy around these specific areas. Because again, exactly what I thought, Dan, you're very prescient there in saying it's focused on metacognition and saying, no, don't use it. I want you to think here, but for this other space, be creative, that kind of thing. And then really delineating that both for faculty and for students as well, and being clear about that. So what does that actually mean? So Tim worked very closely with Professor Rita Owens in our business school. She's been really ahead of the curve on this. Why? Because she teaches business writing for undergraduates and MBA students. And as soon as she saw generative AI, she came panicking to us. Well, it's not panicking, she's a very professional person. She came to us and said, what are we going to do about this? And so Tim's great designs came out of this collaboration. And you'll notice there, it's not just like, hey, you can use AI for this. So there's an online course with Tim's designs for something called Design Tools, and woven into it. For this assignment, you can use generative AI in these specific ways. So it's not like for this course, there is no no. It's for this assignment, because I've tested it out, I've tried it out, and generative AI can assist you in this way with this assignment. And then, so the whole idea is then, as students are getting practice in using generative AI, so when it comes, you'll see there, that's module week 13, we're very end of the semester. Okay, so you've made it till the end, you know exactly what you're doing, feel free to go ahead and experiment with it. But again, giving criteria, giving direction, giving information to students about what they need to do. And then you'll see here, so again, you see starting off for this one, no, I don't want you to use AI for this one, and why? So again, that clear communication of students for your metacognition, for your work in this course, because I've tested it out, please don't use AI for these specific reasons.
All right, so thank you all for that. I think as we were coming up and thinking about, Xueying and I were working with Dan and Louis and John to try and figure out what would a productive session about leveraging AI in assessments look like? What would it include? We thought about, there are really two sides to this coin, and it was nice that Ethan and Louis and everybody in the panel this morning kind of talked about a bit of the two sides of the coin around AI and assessment. What can you do, as Dan and Louis and John have talked about, to have students use AI or not? But also, what can you do to use AI to help you in your own assessment practices? So maybe we could hear a bit from each of you, starting with John briefly, and then Dan, and then Louis. How have you used AI in the present to help you in your assessment design process?
Sorry, I should say those designs are on cdil.bc.edu if you want to take screenshots and stuff like that, or annoy Tim about what he did. Go ahead and do that. So I hate designing rubrics. They're the most time-consuming thing ever. ChatGPT, please design a rubric for me with these criteria and put it into the thing, return. So in using a rubric to encourage students not to use ChatGPT, I use ChatGPT to generate it. What I do as well is with the questions I'm asking students, with the exam questions, putting it into generative AI and seeing what it generates, and then finding what kind of combination of words works right. So generally it's like, in your opinion, and this and that, so doing a road test of how your work, of how your questions kind of work for students. What I also do is I have the students, for the authentic assignment, I have the students try out something called ArcGIS, which is a map storytelling thing, but we don't have maps, we don't have much data, so it works just as well for digital storytelling. So that was really useful for coding, because the students wanted to use it. I didn't know how to code with it. So I said, right, please use generative AI for that. We put our questions into it. Can you please provide the code for ArcGIS to do this feature in ArcGIS? And it did it totally perfectly. Another tip is to put in your learning outcomes for each week, and to ask it to come up with different activities. And what we did last week was different learning activities, looked fine. ChatGPT, can you turn this into a Jeopardy game? And can you put it right in the format? And it does it perfectly in that format. So there's a whole bunch of different tools, different ways of kind of exploring with it. The other thing I strongly encourage students to try out is with format. So again, to your point, Dan, about briefing papers and working papers being a key aspect of public policy as a discipline. I know I've always given links to these great University of North Carolina resources to my students on how to design briefing papers, and they never look at it. They never draw from it. So instead I say, for one of their finals is draft a briefing paper for President Biden about this issue. I want you to start off, use ChatGPT to generate a good format. And thereafter, I want you to focus on because I know generative AI can't do that. Because I'm not teaching them political science writing. I'm not teaching them any kind of writing. I want their ideas, I want their concepts, I want their application of things. So why not use generative AI, which is a language learning model, which knows the formats and styles and everything like that infinitely better than I do, as a great starting point, so students overcome the white page syndrome so that they're confident that they have something good to start with, and you get them to focus on what you want them to do, the more complex metacognitive tasks.
For those of you who are watching, the pink card means we went out of time. A reflection that I have is that when us as teachers discover the potential of ChatGPT to help us with assessment, we realize that if we are using ChatGPT to help build those assessments, why wouldn't we let our students use ChatGPT to do their learning? And so I want to start with a simple example. So I'll let you read, but focus on the bolded statement. But essentially, I'm giving ChatGPT a little bit of context, and then I want to say there was an assignment question that I had written last year that was playful, was about buying hats for a party, and I just wanted a better example that was more relevant to the professional lives of our students. So this was the prompt, and I asked ChatGPT, give me 3 to 5 possible ideas. And I'm summarizing here in the interest of time, but it basically gave me 5 different contexts, each of them with not only the statement that you see here for how students could use simulations, but also what the simulation task was. I only sort of put here a very short summary. But all of a sudden, I had 5 policy areas in which simulations are used, and I could choose from one of them and rebuild my question in one of those areas. This is something that I would have taken me a while. I might not have thought about some of these examples. And not only that, but I then asked ChatGPT to help me rewrite the assignment question by using one of these examples, the one that I liked. So that's on the super short term. On the medium term, I don't know if there's one more slide maybe. I'm not sure. No. Okay. So I have asked ChatGPT to quiz on a particular topic and then assess me. And I haven't deployed that yet, but I basically had ChatGPT ask me a bunch of questions on a particular topic that I was teaching. And it was very good. It probed me. It really made me think more deeply about that subject. The only thing that I didn't like is that it gave me an 8.5 out of 10 at the end of the assessment. And I teach this stuff, but it was good. It was really good. And so I see the seeds now to build assessment tools using that technology.
Thank you. That's neat. So for me, again, in the spirit of doing formative assessments in real time, that's what I'm choosing to focus on. So of course that's fraught with danger because these generative AI tools are inherently probabilistic. So that means they're going to be inaccurate, right? That's fundamentally how they are built. So of course, when you look for the dosage of Tylenol, then of course the answer is going to be right 99.9% of the time because you're asking for factual information that does not require much context. But as soon as you start to deviate from that, then you can see that the accuracy starts to go down a little bit. So again, if you want to do formative assessment in real time, it's really hard, right? If it's not accurate. So how do you do it? Well, the tool that I described earlier, where you have those thematic summaries during lecture, is a tool that basically leverages its main superpower, which is semantic understanding, right, of human language, right, able to understand human language. It can do that very, very well. So that's one. And the other is that there's something that's referred to as an expert in the loop or human in the loop, which must always be there, right, when you use these tools because they're inaccurate. So again, during lecture, I've built that in, so I slipped it in by having a vote. So you'll see how the tool works here. If more of you could please ask questions on the app. So so once students see the representative questions, they get to vote on the ones that they like the most. So you see that's sort of a natural way to get this filtering, that if GPT did not do a good job, right, at coming up with some of the representative questions. They'll be edited away, from the voting stage. And then for me as the instructor, I'm the human in the loop. Then I can be like, okay, let's not focus on this particular question here. Losing my train of thought here. So the thing that I'm doing right now is a step beyond that, is to provide answers. What's the color of this one? Pink? Is to provide answers in real time. So, and that's not so simple, but it actually works. So.
And I don't know if you see the semantic of the color, but it looks like a pink slip.
Okay, thank you. So you've all talked about how you have built AI into your assessment practice and your teaching. Now let's look ahead about the future of assessments in the age of AI. When you think about the future of AI and assessments of teaching and learning, what are you most hopeful and most excited about?
Well, for me, it's the holy grail of education, right? To put students in a learning environment that starts to approach that of one-on-one tutoring with an expert tutor, right? So, and we can do it now in the sense that we can get pretty darn close with the current technology. So when we talk about hope, and for us, for our students in a residential education setting, what's really exciting is that there are two really big pillars, in education for our students. One is the social aspect, right? That they come in, they learn from each other, they collaborate with each other. And the other one is just straight up raw learning, right? Information, skill, and so forth. So with the AI tutoring tools, you're going to be able to do that very well. And then our students, just by the fact that they're here, they can get the social aspect as well. That's just, to me, that's dreamy.
So, if you haven't done it yet, please don't do it in this moment, but I suggest that you take a topic that you are interested in and ask ChatGPT to teach you and quiz you about that topic that you want to learn. And do that and explain to ChatGPT or whatever tool you want, explain everything that you think would be relevant. Say, explain it to me as if I were a 10th grader, whatever it is, and ask it to ask questions. And I think what you will discover is that it's a much more personalized experience than if you were in a classroom and a teacher were asking the class questions. You can tailor much more to your background, to your needs. You can students have revealed this to me. You can ask questions without fear of embarrassment, either about your teacher or in front of other students. And to me, the hope is that we can conduct assessments in that way, that students can use it in a way that the tool is adapting to their learning. Like right now, we're in this room together, all of us, and each of you is thinking a different way in which you would like this to go. Why is this guy speaking so slow? Why is this guy doing this? What is this guy? And you can't do anything about it other than leave the room. But yet, if you engage with an AI tool, you can actually personalize it. And then the last thing, before I get the pink slip, the last thing is that it changes fundamentally from an enterprise where the teacher is asking the questions to an enterprise where the student is asking the questions. It gives the student a lot more agency. And I say the student, but it's all of us. It gives us much more agency over what we want to learn and how to learn it. Does it hallucinate? Does it deviate? Yes, absolutely. But my hope is that is going to be increasingly less common. So I'm optimistic about that future.
I'm very, very optimistic about it because as somebody who works in faculty development and innovation, I've never had so many faculty come up to me and say, I accept the written essay is dead. What are we doing? What is kind of happening? So a big thing that we're kind of helping out a whole bunch, because we work a lot with social sciences faculty and things like that, we're focusing on is storytelling and digital storytelling in particular. and giving students the space to be creative, to learn new skills, to try out different things that a written essay just can't do. And so faculty would first, you go for a written essay because it's done it. The person whose job I took, they had the questions. That's what I know, and you kind of go with it. And I've been very successful in my academic career to do that. And now generative AI has made that in many ways irrelevant. So what kind of comes next? And authentic assessments are what comes next. We did a showcase at the School of Education on Monday, and I showed some examples of, I can't think of a better word, but scrolly telling. So, things in the New York Times, where you scroll down, it has some text, has some videos, all that kind of stuff. And I had about 12 emails afterwards from faculty saying, how do I do this? How do I get this? So we're at a stage now where we have an opportunity to move beyond the essay and give students guidance, to give students opportunities to demonstrate their learning in much, much more different ways. And what I really like about this is, and it is my course in the spring, it gives students an opportunity to do that and to take ownership over it. And you create a scaffolded experience so it reduces anxiety for students. So they're mapping things out, they're coming up with wireframes, they're giving you ideas, developing a whole bunch of skills. And at the end of it, you're not grading a whole pile of the same essays over and over again. And students get motivated and enthused by it. And for them, what I've heard back from so many students is they have something to share out. So you can have students that write an unbelievable, incredible essay for you in your course, and then you kind of tear it up or you delete it or whatever. But now if you use ArcGIS or Adobe Spark or have them create podcasts or Google Sites or something, they have something tangible for their learning that they can put in their LinkedIn, that they can share out with their family members to demonstrate their learning. And that, for me, is the greatest opportunity of AI. Not for all the things it can do, but what for it's requiring us to think in new and different ways that we've always known we should have done, but we just never got around to doing.
Have you used this in your class, in your teaching already live? Is that accurate? You've used the kind of this system where you're...
I've been using it this past year, yeah.
And have you experienced any challenges in using this tool or AI more generally? Doing it live in your teaching, having it run in the classroom?
Well, I can tell you when we went from GPT-3 to GPT-4, which was in late spring, right? Oh my goodness. And that was kind of sad because we worked so hard throughout the year, and then you have to fight with GPT-3 because there are lots of errors and everything. Then at the end of the spring, GPT-4 came out. It was magic. It was so close to what we were able to do, human experts, in 2-3 hours. So that's one thing that we saw. Another is that you have to think carefully about, telling students what they should ask questions about and how they should ask questions. Again, they don't understand how the AI works, and you can see it in some of the questions that they're asking. So you have to teach them basically how the AI functions, and then get much better quality output.
Maybe while it processes, Dan and John, you could talk, Dan, you've also tried this. What challenges have you and your students faced?
I use a tool that seems similar to this, but to summarize what lessons students have learned in the class, and maybe we'll experiment with that technology. I have found it incredibly helpful for the same reasons that Louis found helpful his tool, which is it does what it would take me hours to do in just a few seconds. So will it replace me as a teacher? I hope not. But has it increased my abilities as a teacher? I think the answer is yes.
I think the biggest issue we've faced is the asymmetry between faculty that are, hey, go right ahead and use it, and other faculty are like, if you use it, I'm failing you and I'm going to pursue you. And so students are very reticent and very concerned. And so when we've talked to our students about undergrad and grad level, they've been really annoyed because they're like, BC and Harvard and other institutions that are here, we're really smart, we're really motivated, and this is the future and you need to tell us. And so I think the biggest issue we've faced is not from the student side. They're hungry to learn. They're really hungry for guidance. They want our guidance. They want our expertise. They want to explore it in safe ways. But they're really annoyed at the lack of institutional direction, at the lack of guidance, for very understandable reasons, that kind of thing, and the asymmetry in what faculty are kind of saying about it. That's the biggest issue that we've encountered. And so getting students to, like in my class, say, it's okay. You can use it. I know generative AI can't do this, so if you use it, you're going to fail. But if you use it and then add to it, you're going to do just fine.
Thanks so much. So maybe we just start from the top with theme number 1, and have you each really quickly respond to this question. What is the potential impact of AI in transforming the framework of education and in turn influencing what should be assessed? Real small question. maybe we can start with, I'll just start next to me. We'll start with John and then move on to a question from theme 2.
Pretty much everything I've been saying the whole time. Yeah. That we have an opportunity to go for authentic assessments, to get students to create things and to build things, because if they're using generative AI to get past that blank page, to get format and basic structure, to cover the basic, the things at the lower levels of Bloom's, and then we're given an opportunity to be creative, then why can't they utilize all these amazing technologies? Like we use Google Sites a lot. It's like we have Google Institution, everyone can access it, you can create templates. Why not use it? Why have them write a 2,000 word essay that you're going to throw in the bin? We have a huge opportunity here to allow students to be creative, to create, I keep saying creative, to be creative, but to try out new things, showcase their skills in different ways. And again, not to grade a giant pile of essay. I keep saying from the social sciences, humanities, but not to grade a whole pile of things and give them space to kind of do interesting things with their work. That's the biggest change I see.
And Dan, maybe you could respond a bit to this second question as well under theme 1. With the advent of AI, what skills should be held on to and which ones should become irrelevant?
I think that varies tremendously by discipline, so I'm not sure that I can say. What I will say is that as instructors, we are likely to move too slow and to want to justify why our students should still learn this skill that ChatGPT can do. I am not saying that if ChatGPT can do it, your students should not be asked to do it. But I think there are lots of things that students shouldn't have to do anymore. In my own field, I teach statistics. I'm trying to grapple with the fact that you can do a lot of coding right now, automated with AI. Will it replace the need for human coders? No, but it will augment the capabilities of human coders. And the question is, what's the human side of that human plus machine that we need to develop? And I think every instructor should ask that for their students.
Should I just move to the next one?
Yeah.
Okay, so theme 2, AI's utility and limitations in student assessment. Okay. Can our artificial intelligence generate meaningful summative assessments and align them with curricular standards? Yes, that's pretty much what we've been saying. Yeah, this will be fully automated with, of course, human in the loop. So what I like to tell people is that the AI, the way you should view it as an educator is like putting on an exoskeleton, right? So nothing's going to change. I mean, you're still going to be needed. In fact, you're going to be providing far more value than you have thus far. That's what I would say.
For anybody who's interested, I think in particular in this third theme about the ethical and safety concerns regarding education, does someone want to ask a question that's in that theme or share a question they have that's in that theme? Sure. All right.
This was my first question, and I don't really feel like it was put up there, so I'm a little concerned about that. But so you talked about, so I'm Barbara Cockrell from the medical school. You talked about the expert in the loop. So what happens, so first of all, how do we know that the information coming from AI that our students are learning is correct, number one? And what happens in 15 years when students who have only learned on AI, when we're not around to be the expert in the loop anymore, who's going to do that? Because it just worries me, like reading an EKG, if there's something wrong in that loop and no one's around to address that it just gets perpetuated.
Yeah, that's a good question. So, yeah, a lot of skills are going to be fossilized, right? Like, what do you call this in English? Handwriting, you know? cursive writing that used to be, of course that's a cliche, but now it's a fossilized skill, right? So a lot of things like this are gonna go by the wayside as well, but there's certainly dangers. So, and on the topic of assessments, then we're gonna have to be very careful about what we assess. So in the medical school, I would think that these tools I bet these tools are coming now, right, this year?
They're in the hospitals.
Yeah, that's right. So sure, and then I'm sure that on the one hand, you encourage the residents to actually use the tools, you teach them how to use the tools, but then there's the concern that for the human in the loop, that they're going to lose that skill, that essential skill, so then it falls back on assessment. Is that if they know that they're going to be assessed, then they're going to have to do some of the practice. So I think that means we're going to have to reassess the way we assess our learners. Yeah, that would be my answer.
John, do you have anything?
I don't work in IT, and I don't really that affiliate to technology, but the way I understand it is, in the very near future, there's going to be a Harvard LLM. There's already a Michigan LLM. And so you're going to upload all your information, all your data, everything, the library, everything like that. And that will be used as a basis for a lot of the material. So overcoming disinformation will be around that kind of aspect of it. I know this is what Google is planning to do. They've got this tool called Notebook, whereby you'll upload material to it, and then it will use that as the basis of truth, of knowledge. So in your class, that will be the basis of knowledge for it. And then it will use the large language learning models it uses then to fill it out and add in the kind of gaps. So there's a kind of, that's the way it's kind of going to go, as far as I understand it, that we're going to create our own LLMs with all the information to overcome disinformation and things like that. But then to your other point about, like, what if these skills get fossilized, and some will, but that's up to us, to your point, Dan, about what are the skills we're emphasizing? What are the skills we're saying, like, no, you have to do this. You have to struggle. Because I think it's still the case at the CS department here for first years, you have to use Blue Books. I'm pretty sure it is the case in the Boston College Computer Science department as well, because they're like, that ChatGPT can code very, very well. But when you get to your junior and senior years, if you don't go through this struggle, if you don't kind of go engage in this, you're not going to do well, and you're going to fail. And you can't walk into an interview at Google and just like, oh, I'll just ask ChatGPT with the answer. You can't do that. So they've drawn a line in the sand and said, like, for this, you can't use ChatGPT. You can't use generative AI. You can't use it for this. They've identified those as core skills that regardless, well, for right now, where the technology goes, you need to know this. And I think that's incumbent upon us, to your point, Dan, about making those executive decisions about these are key skills you just need to do.
First, Barbara, thank you for being here and for the question. I do want to recognize the difference in context. Barbara teaches at the medical school. If ChatGPT makes something up, it can have very, very large consequences on the lives of other human beings. Lots of us teaching disciplines where the stakes might not be so high, so the tolerance for hallucination might be higher. I don't think we can escape that. I think different contexts require different levels of sort of safeguards. And I don't know, I mean, in medicine, it seems like medical knowledge has been in books and other places, so that's not an excuse for students not to learn it. They need those foundational skills. I can't imagine you going to a doctor and the doctor saying, wait a second, let me go ChatGPT and then we're gonna go back to you. So I don't know, my sense is that in each field that human plus machine equation will take a different form, and that it's up to us, at least at this stage, to help imagine what that looks like and what is that human component that still needs to be there. And maybe that human component has to be evaluative and be able to sort of see what the technology is doing, and a little bit less of the creation. I'm not sure, obviously I don't have medical expertise, but I think each of us is going to be in a different field where we're going to, my hope is that we're going to grapple hard with that question. What does the human plus machine look like in that field?
I think we have time for one more question. So does anybody, whether it's about this ethics and safety or something that didn't crop up, maybe it's one of themes 5, 6, and 7, or 4, 5, 6, and 7 that's not up here.
Hi, I'm Carrie Conaway. I'm with the Harvard Graduate School of Education. And I have a question that I have a feeling Dan might be interested in answering, but maybe there's one or two of the other of you might as well, which is most of what I've played around with is using ChatGPT, which generates word-oriented output. How might we use tools like this in more quantitative courses, something more statistical?
Carrie, thank you for being here. I don't know how it is in physics, so I'll let you answer that. But I think in statistics, which both Carrie and I teach, in ChatGPT today, there's a plugin, ChatGPT 4, where basically you can upload a data set and start querying it. Is it going to develop the skills in the students in the same way than them writing on the code from the beginning? No, but it can get students pretty far at that level. So there are plugins already developed for doing that. These plugins not only exist, but you can actually extract the code from those plugins, so then you can go back to the coding environment. And then the second way in which this happens is not through ChatGPT, but through other tools like Copilot, where students can have their code and then Copilot suggest or help them code. And that's another perhaps more direct and relevant way for the profession that our students are going to go. So I think my sense is the potential here is huge. And again, going back to Barbara's question, the question is, okay, given that ChatGPT or generative AI can do all of these things, what is the human role that's needed here? And the human role might not be remembering what is the correct syntax for this particular command. The human role might be thinking about the structure of the problem, breaking it down into pieces, and then figuring it out, and then letting the machine write the code for each of those pieces.
So, before we kind of have a wrap up, if everybody could go to this QR code, I know we're just full of QR codes today. It feels a bit like a restaurant. These aren't menus, but if you go to this QR code, you can add reflections, and we just invite you to add your reflections on today, and Dan will help us with a tool that he has developed to summarize these reflections again using artificial intelligence. While you are adding your reflections, I just want to thank all of you for coming and joining us, for submitting your questions, for playing around in some of the AI sandboxes and tools that Louis and Dan have shared with us. I also want to thank Xueying for helping to plan all of this out and riding the journey with me over the last 4 to 6 weeks. And of course, I want to thank Louis, Dan, and John for coming and sharing your experiences. I think this is a space where I won't mention how many people I reached out to try and get people on this panel. I've done 3 HILT conference panels. This was the hardest to populate. And I think it's because there's a lot of vulnerability in coming up and saying, none of us really know everything that we're doing right now. We're just trying. So I want to say how much I appreciate Louis and Dan and John for sharing your trying.
Thank you. I thought you were going to say that we were your last choice. Thank you.
You were far from the last choice.
Thank you.
It was, but it's really the vulnerability that I think you've shown, and the honesty and transparency that you've shown, and your willingness to share also what you have been working on. We will, as we move through, you can still access the slides. We'll leave that information up. I will be adding in details for the CETL website. As John said, you can go and have a look at the different graphics that Tim created. And we'll also be continuing to include links to some of the tools, dynamic lecture that Louis demoed there for the themes. And Dan will be helping us to kind of put up a new summary tool.
All right. So this is only based on the first 16 answers. So it's kind of the same idea. I didn't know we have to come to a HILT conference on AI to know what each other are doing, but I think we developed these tools with the same sort of goals. So here, in the same spirit than Louis' tool, it's summarizing the main ideas. In this particular case, because I asked for your names, I asked also the AI tool to pick tools that it thought were interesting, so quotes that it thought were interesting. So if you're in a classroom, you can go and not only summarize what the students learned, but also pick quotes of certain with certain characteristics. So here, if we had more time, I would ask Stephanie a little bit more about the quote, or Evan, and so on. So just like Louis' tool, the advantage of this is literally you can do in a few seconds at the end of a session or in the middle of a session what it would take a lot more time in an actual classroom. So, Erin, one of you should have the last word.
Okay, I think Erin already said everything you want to say. We really thank you so much for joining us, and hopefully we'll have something all together as a community in this room. We all learned something. Thank you so much again.